Well, here's a little more lighthearted activity within the ULAT program, which may be particularly pertinent and particularly timely within the course of Super Bowl week. If you've been using the ULAT program up to this point, and therefore your students understand the meaning of the images used in its first unit, teaching the 60 most commonly used verbs, as well as the personal pronouns that accompany them, then here's a way in which you can learn how to play the ULAT football game. Going from the home page of the ULAT, you go to Daily Lessons, and then select either French or Spanish. And here you see the table of contents containing the 70 classes, the first 70 classes within the 170 class program for the first year. We'll go to class number 70, in which the football game appears for the first time. We click there, and here you see the instructions for the students as to the activities they are to perform during the class, the first of which takes them to the video that you'll be watching, the portion of this video that you'll be watching in just a moment. Down below, however, you see by clicking here, the classroom teacher can download the detailed lesson plan regarding the day's activities. And as you look at point number 2, you see ULAT football game. By clicking there, you can find the detailed instructions or the rules governing the game. But let's go take a look at the game itself within the ULAT website. By clicking on here, this will take us to the portion of the video that will present the game to you. In today's class, we're simply going to do one thing, and we're going to learn how to play a game. Now, what could possibly justify spending an entire class period just learning how to play a game? Well, this game, which is a football game, undoubtedly inspired by the fact that this is Super Bowl week, it's of value for 3 reasons. First of all, this particular game and others like it, you'll play on several occasions throughout the course of the ULAT program, so you simply need to know how to do it. But in addition, the most important reason is that it involves the convergence of 2 different elements, which combined will have the greatest impact on your ability to speak the language at the greatest rate of speech possible. And those 2 elements are the 60 most commonly used verbs that we've been learning in the course of Unit 1, and then putting those verbs together with a pronoun in the simple present tense, the most commonly used tense as you express yourself in this new language. And so the objective itself is of great value. And then thirdly, I think you'll find it's kind of fun, especially for those of you who like sports and who like competition. So in any case, let's get into the game. Let me show you where it's located. You can see now that we're within section, we're in lesson 1.48, and we'll scroll down to the 4th section after you've reviewed the conjugation of verbs, put them in complete sentences, and here in section 4, you come upon 2 footballs, each representing 1/2 of competition. You see that the size of the files, the PowerPoint files, by the way, which you'll download, are rather large, and so be patient. It may take a little while to download them. In fact, for the instructor, he or she will want to download them before class in order to not have to waste time during class. So in any case, let's take a look now at how the game is played. I'm not going to provide great detail. I'm simply going to play it before you for a certain period of time. Then after I've shown you more or less how the game is played, we'll go and take a look at some specific rules. So here we are in Welcome to ULAT Football, the ULAT football game. There are, on each of the screens where there is information you need to understand in order to play, you'll find a detailed explanation. However, we're not going to read it at this point. I'm simply going to carry out the activity. Well, there are 2 teams. The class is divided up into 2 teams. One team will be the red team, one is the white team. Whichever team, by the way, wins the coin toss and gets to go first and receives the ball, they will automatically be the red team throughout the game. So you notice the ball down here. You'll see it moving throughout the course of the game. I hit the first half kickoff button, and now you see several important elements. First, you see again the ball is down here on the 20. That's because automatically on a kickoff the ball will be placed on the 20-yard line, simply because there's no returning a kickoff in this game. And that's pretty much typical of the way actually professional football works nowadays. Secondly, you'll notice in the upper right-hand corner that there's a number, and this number represents the yard line in which the ball is located. Then you see a series of buttons up here. Some additional buttons will appear at different points on the field, but for the moment you have just punt, fumble, and field goal. You see the red team's buttons and the white team's buttons, and you see the direction in which the teams are moving. So the red team is moving from left to right across your screen, and the white team is moving from right to left across the screen. Well, I'll do all this in English so that this video can serve the teaching of other languages as well. You see in the center of the screen for those who have studied the ULAT, who have studied it for a period now of 69 classes up until this class, these images are very, very well known. We have I and give. I and give. And so the offensive team begins one player at a time in order, and the first player says, I give. And notice that when the teacher hits the right arrow key, that we move to the next screen. It now says 21 yards, and down here the ball is on the 21-yard line. And the next student who also recognizes these images says, they wash. Correct. And you like. By the way, the student has 5 seconds in which to provide this answer, or well, you'll see in the detailed rules later exactly what the consequence is. We sit down, and then the next one, I'll intentionally make a mistake here. The student says, you give, and this is not you give, it's you live. And so within 5 seconds, the defensive player, who's the first in his team in order, has to correct the statement. It says, you live, and at that point, the runner is down. The first down ends. So they gained 4 yards on their first down because the defensive player stopped them by saying the correct response after 4 advances. You'll notice that each screen advances things 1 yard. Well, on second down, let's assume that they say she sells, and then I make, and then he wants, and this really should be you want. And so the defensive player says, you want, and again, the player is therefore tackled because the defensive player within 5 seconds has said the statement correctly. And then let's say this is a significant matter. Let's say that on the next screen, this is third down now, and they need to make 3 more yards for a first down. On the next, we come to the next screen. The offensive player says here, they study. Well, this is not the verb study. This is the verb read. And so at that point, this is a fumble. When the incorrectly stated verb is used, that's considered a fumble. We immediately hit the fumble button, which always moves the ball back 3 yards, by the way. And at this point, 2 players, the next offensive player and the defensive player who is up, have the chance to say the statement as quickly as they can when they see this screen right here. And they will say, the first one who says she sells, not seashells, but she sells, falls on the ball, recovers the ball for his or her team. Let's assume that the white team, the defensive team, made the statement first of all, and at that point, therefore, they take over the ball at the 25-yard line. And I won't go through and give the explanation for each of the different statements here, but we'll just assume they advance the ball within 3 downs, a total of 7 yards. So now on the 18-yard line, you notice how the teacher is using the left arrow key by this point because we're moving from right to left as the white team takes over. And they come to a point where it's 4th down. The team captain, chosen before the game, by the way, the team captain decides, look at the next player. I'm not very confident about his or her ability to say the next statement correctly. We're going to go for a field goal. And so what happens at this point? The teacher hits the field goal button, and you have a choice to make. The team captain must choose a letter, A through I, to determine the outcome of that of the kick. The team captain chooses B. Just sit back and watch. It's good, and the score is now 3-0 in favor of the white team. You'll notice it says at the bottom the field goal is good. Click below to place the ball on the 20-yard line for the opposing team after the ensuing kickoff. Since you can't return a kickoff, we will just hit the kickoff button, and now the red team has the ball back again on their 20-yard line. Well, let's assume, again, without saying all the different statements here, that they advance the ball a total of 6 yards, and now it's 4th down. And they decide that they're going to punt. Now, a punt may be returned by the receiving team, which is going to be the white team. And so we hit punt. And at that point, the ball will automatically advance a total of 45 yards. The receiving team may call for a fair catch. Are you still with me, all of you who don't know a thing about football? Let me try to continue. The receiving team, the captain of the receiving team, may call for a fair catch, especially if he or she looks at the next player and thinks, I'm not sure that player is able to respond accurately and promptly, because there's a risk in returning a punt. On a punt, as you'll see in the very detailed rules for this game, a punt may you only have 3 seconds in which to provide the proper statement, which in this particular case would be "she closes" in the language that you're studying. And so with only 3 seconds there, and knowing that the student has to respond quickly and could easily use the wrong verb because the time is so brief, there's the danger of what happens when you use the wrong verb? Yes, a fumble. And therefore, you can call for a fair catch. But let's assume that the team captain has absolute confidence in the next player, and the next player indeed says she closes. At that point, the punt return is in progress. I'll do one more series of downs to give you the general idea. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll take the ball inside the 10-yard line so you can see a touchdown. So I'm just moving across the screen, holding down the left arrow key. And we come to the 8-yard line, 1st and goal for the white team. And so the first player says, what is that? Quick, up! I didn't answer within 5 seconds. That is, they are, by the way, but I didn't answer within 5 seconds. And so at that point, I am down automatically because I didn't say anything. No advance. It is 2nd and goal. The next player for the offensive team now says, they are. And the teacher moves the ball forward. The play continues. And then you take. And the next player says, you run. Correct. And the next player says, you go down. And the defensive player says, no, it's you go up. And so at that point, the player is tackled. That's 3rd and goal. And now the next player says, the next player on the offensive team repeats, you go up, the ball advances, and then she enters, and then we wash, and then they are, and then the next player says, last of all, you say, and bedlam breaks out in the classroom as a touchdown has been scored. At this point, the team captain, as explanation is indicated here, has to choose whether they're going to take the automatic extra point, which isn't kicked, it is simply assumed it will be made, or go for the 2-point conversion, and the 2-point conversion must be made. And so I'll click on the button for 2 points. That moves the ball back to the 5-yard line, which, by the way, in professional sports should be the 3-yard line. But since this is the Ufl Football League, we will play by my rules. The ball's on the 5-yard line, and they go for the 2-point conversion that will transpire in the way any normal play goes, except they must advance 5 plays or 5 yards on that particular play. Get the idea? Well, you're asking yourself, this is crazy. How could you? It can be learned. I have some suggestions about how this game can be learned because it's of tremendous value. Because as you're playing it, they'll be repeating constantly the verb conjugations of the 60 most commonly used verbs that they learn in the course of Unit 1. Now, how could the game best be learned? I would suggest find those in the class who love sports, who love competition, and who love football. Give them the rules the night before you're going to introduce the game and let them pore over it at home. The more people you have in class who understand when you go through the explanation of how the game is played, more or less, to get the gist of the game, the easier it's going to be to explain it. Okay, let's go take a look at the rules right now. Just a little more detailed rules. They're not all going to be listed there. I've given you here just a synthesis of the most important elements in the rules. You will notice, however, before I show you the printed rules, that at the bottom of the screen it says here rules. And it says that on every screen. By clicking there, this opens a Word document with all the detailed rules, which are about a page and a half of text, which explain how the game is played. You can print those by clicking there and opening up the Word document, and therefore give the explanation to your students. Okay, let's go take a look at those rules, the most important elements right now. Rules to the Ufl football game. Offensive and defensive players. Only one player on a team may speak at a time, and this must be done in an order that is determined prior to the game's start. So divide your team into two, your class into two teams. Determine the order in which people will speak, and that order must be respected. No, there's no speaking out of turn, which is, by the way, the only penalty. I'll explain that later, is speaking out of turn. There are four outcomes, you've already seen them to some extent, of trying to advance the football, of making an offensive play. If the current offensive player, and in some cases it may well be in your classes the offensive player, but in the current offensive player refers to the one whose turn it is at that point. If he provides or she provides the correct word or phrase within 5 seconds, play moves on to the next yard line, as you saw. The second possible outcome of an offensive play is if the current offensive player says nothing within 5 seconds, the play ends there and there's no gain in the play. You saw that as well. Third outcome, if the current offensive player says the correct verb but conjugates it incorrectly, the current defensive player has 5 seconds in which to repeat the phrase correctly, and at that point, the player is tackled. And then you saw that as well on numerous occasions. And then the fourth outcome is if the current offensive player speaks but says the entirely wrong verb, asterisk, I'll explain, even if conjugated correctly, this is considered a fumble, and the next player offensively and the current player defensively both speak simultaneously, and the one who says the statement correctly is the one who recovers the ball for his or her team. Now, the asterisk is that the fumble rule, this issue about a fumble, only applies when you're dealing with verbs and verb conjugations. We'll have other variants of this game when we're dealing with vocabulary and not verb conjugation. In those particular instances, I won't go on explaining why, but in those instances, the fumble rule does not exist. Let us continue. Timeouts. Each team gets one 30-second timeout per half. They may call a timeout just to discuss strategy, but they also may call a timeout because it's a running clock otherwise. It may be called in the middle of a play, and here's why. If the team captain recognizes that the next player is probably not going to say the verb correctly, either they have the wrong verb resulting in a fumble or incorrectly conjugate, the team captain may call quickly for a timeout in the midst of the play, and one time per half, the teacher can be called upon to give the student who is currently the current offensive player, give them the infinitive form of the verb, not the conjugated form. The student must still come up with a proper conjugated form, but the infinitive form of the verb to ensure that student not say the wrong verb and fumble. Let me give you an example. If you're on your own 1 yard line and a very weak student comes up and that student were to say the wrong verb in the heat of the moment, that would result in a fumble, putting the ball 3 yards back, which means 2 yards back in your end zone. With that being the case, it's either going to result in a touchdown if the defense recovers it, or a safety if the offense recovers it. So a timeout at that point, making sure that student gets the right infinitive, is probably of great value. So that's timeouts. Advancing the football. Only way to do that is for the offensive player to correctly say the word or phrase represented by the images on the current screen within 5 seconds. I think you got the idea. Tackling, you got the idea also. Defensive player corrects a mistake within 5 seconds after it's made. Punts, the current offensive player on the punt return team has only 3 seconds. I talked about that as well, in which to provide the response during a punt return. Acceleration rule. Now, this is an interesting rule which is optional. You don't have to apply it, but I think it would make the game all the more realistic. And that is, once the play is underway and the ball has moved 10 yards, 10 correct responses have been provided in a row, and the play is continuing, after the 10th yard, every correct answer moves the ball up 2 yards at a time. And then after 20 yards, every correct answer moves the ball up 3 yards at a time. So in other words, the player is breaking away, and there's a good chance they will not be caught as they streak toward the end zone. As I said last of all, the penalties, there's only one penalty for speaking out of turn, and that penalty is always a 15-yard penalty. And so that's a teacher who will apply that. Now, I'm saying the teacher all this time. If you're an independent study student or a homeschooled student, You can try and fool yourself into believing you have competition, but most likely you're going to need to find one other person who understands the images, the ULET images, with whom you can play this game. Well, there's more explanation, there's more detail within the actual rules. Probably one of the most important elements is reading about the suggested setup. You need 4 people, essentially, if you're in a classroom situation. A teacher to run the computer. You need someone to be the linesman, the one who keeps track of where the ball ends at the end of each down. They will be writing down a piece of paper, crossing out, then write down the location of the ball for the next play. This is important because you need somebody to keep track of where the first down marker is. That's asking too much of the teacher to keep track of such things. Or if you use the acceleration rule, you also need someone who's conscious of when the ball has already advanced 10 yards in order to start accelerating its advance. You need a team captain for both teams, so that makes 4 different individuals you should assign those tasks before the game, as well as determining the order in which people will speak. Well, there's only one more rule that is extremely important that you remember, and that is, no matter what happens, no deflating the football. All right, go to it. See you next class.